Welcome back into the wrong side of the pond. This is the second episode of the Career Versus series. In this episode we'll have Eli Manning, Philip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger. Who had the better career? It's time to find out. So these three names will be attached for their whole careers, especially two of them, Eli Manning and Philip Rivers. In the 2004 draft, the San Diego Chargers were told by Eli and his family that they were not interested in playing in San Diego. However, the Chargers decided to draft him anyway, just for banter, and eventually traded him for Philip Rivers, who was the number 4th pick from the New York Giants. Then with the 11th pick, the Steelers selected Ben Roethlisberger, and then the Buffalo Bills selected J.P. Osman, but he doesn't make the cut for this video. So we start off with the man who was selected number 1 overall, the quarterback out of Ole Miss, the new Manning golden child, Eli Manning. As we said, selected number 1 by the San Diego Chargers. However, I had already told them and made it public really that he was not going to play in San Diego, and got his move to the New York Giants eventually, making all his family happy. He currently sits at number 7 on the all-time passing yards with 236 games, 57,023 yards, a 60.3% completion percentage and 366 touchdowns to 244 interceptions. 4-time Pro Bowler, 2-time Super Bowl champion, 2-time Super Bowl MVP, and 3rd overall in consecutive games played. So Eli is a man that we sort of come to believe with these three, he'll be the least talented out of the three. He certainly has a career that somewhat goes like this, but he's had some highs in his career that some players will never have. His career can almost be summed up in his first 3 seasons in the league. He went 1 for 6 in his first rookie year. In the 2005 season, he done a lot better. He crashed and burned at the end of the season and they went out in the wildcard round. And then he went on to win the Super Bowl in the biggest upset of all time. That 2007 season, he sort of had his back up against the wall. The fans weren't yet sold on Eli Manning. The owner had come out and publicly criticised him. They had seen what Big Ben had done, which we'll talk about later. And they were wondering why their number 1 pick hadn't yet produced that high level of football they were waiting for. By week 17, they had made the playoffs, but they decided to play their starters in order to try and beat the undefeated New England Patriots. They were unable to defeat the Patriots in that game, with the Patriots going 16-0. But when the Super Bowl came around and they were there, and the New England Patriots were there, and David Tyree's helmet was there, he caught the ball and they went on to win the game, and it was the biggest upset in Super Bowl history. After that Super Bowl, Manning sort of went into what we would come to know for the rest of his career, where he just sort of slumped middle of the pack as a quarterback. They didn't make the playoffs for 3 years, and he sort of had some good moments, but also the interceptions were becoming a problem for him. Up until 2011, where they went 9-7, and then when they were back in the playoffs, Manning decided to turn on his playoff mode, coming up against my Green Bay Packers, 15-1 Super Bowl champions Green Bay Packers, and crushed them. Yes, crushed them. After which he led the New York Giants, the misfit New York Giants, 9-7, into the Super Bowl against the great Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, the rematch of 2007, and he beat them again. Tom Brady, on the final drive, didn't win the Super Bowl. No, it was the New York Giants. Yes, the New York Giants won 2, and he won the MVP for both of them, Eli Manning. After those great heroics in the Super Bowl, he then went on to go back into his normal Eli Manning mode that we had seen after 2007. The Giants not making the playoffs for another 4 more years. They missed every single season, including the 2013 season where he threw 27 interceptions. Just became a massive problem of Eli's career, would be his interceptions and his ability to find the other team. But in 2016, they were back in the playoffs. They went 11-5 in a really underrated season for Eli Manning. He had, I think, an 87 passer rating, 26 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, but he played all right. Then he came up against the Green Bay Packers and we won. We won. This time we beat him. 38-13, the Packers prevailed in that year, but Manning's season overall was not a bad season. It was very underrated. A lot of people always picked bad Manning and his terrible years, but in fairness, that year was a good year for him. So after a high like that, as I just said, in the 2017 season, we all knew Manning would go back to the way he was. And he did. They started off 2-9. He wasn't outfelt. I mean, the New York Giants in that 2017 season were just a really crap team. And he started off at 2-9. and Ben McAdoo had enough, threw him on the bench. In came Geno Smith, who was even worse than Eli Manning, and then Manning came back in and finished up the season 3-13. And then coming into 2018, it was sort of the feeling then through most of the people around the league that Eli was probably, they should move on, look for somebody else in that year's draft. At the start of last season, they did draft his replacement in Daniel Jones. In week 3, Jones took over, had a good season, had an average season, played good, played bad. Manning came in for a few games when Jones got injured. Jones eventually took over in week 16 to finish up the season, and Manning was left to retire. The question with Manning will always be, will he be a Hall of Famer? He has 2 Super Bowls, 2 Super Bowl MVPs, but apart from that, he has a lot of seasons where he was the bottom third of the league in terms of quarterback play. He had great moments, but he also had a lot of bad moments. And there's always that talk, is what does the 2 Super Bowl MVPs, that sort of playoff Manning, make up for almost the regular season Manning at times where they weren't good? Not always his fault. The New York Giants went through stages where they were a really good, tough team to beat. Then they also went through times where they were not a very good team at all. So should he make it into the Hall of Fame? Next up is quarterback out of NC State, the man drafted number 4 in that year's draft, and a man who will be called upon to repopulate the earth one day, I'm sure. That is Philip Rivers. Out of these 3 that we're going to compare, he leads them in passing yards, he leads them in touchdowns, and pass completions. He currently sits on 228 games, 64.7 pass completion percentage, 59,271 yards, 397 touchdowns to 198 interceptions. His rookie season didn't really play, sat behind 2 quarterbacks known as Drew Brees and Doug Flutie. That's not a bad quarterback room, if I must say. After 2 years, Doug Flutie had been released, and then Drew Brees had suffered a shoulder injury, so was not re-signed. He ended up signing with the New Orleans Saints, and I'm not really sure what happened to his career after that. With Rivers, it's always about his consistency. He's one of the most consistent quarterbacks of all time. He's always up there in the late 20s, early 30s in terms of touchdowns. Always there in the low teens in sort of interceptions. He's had years where he's spiked in both areas, gone up to as high as 34 touchdowns, also gone up as high as 21 interceptions, but usually in that sort of low teens for interceptions, high 20s for touchdowns. And that's a model of consistency that he's maintained for the last 15 years. He's led the league multiple times in yards. In 2008, he led the league in touchdowns with 34 and in passer rating. In fact, between 2008 and 2010, that was probably his best stretch of his career. He led the league, like I said, in touchdowns in 2008, and then led the league in 2009 and 2010 in passing yards. This is a league at the time with Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Big Ben, all playing their best football. And Philip Rivers was up there competing with those guys. At the start of the 2011 season, he led all time in passer rating and was second all time in touchdowns to interceptions ratio. Unfortunately, that 2011 and 2012 season weren't good for him. Struggled in both seasons. They missed the playoffs both years, and he was just not playing very good football at the time. He started to make the mistakes that we've just spoke about with Eli Manning, started turning the ball over a lot more than he had in the past. The team did struggle though in that mid-2010s, not making the playoffs again into 2017. They were back to their best in 2018. Philip Rivers was back to his best, throwing for 32 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, but again couldn't overcome the playoff hump where Tom Brady and the New England Patriots were to defeat the Chargers in the divisional round. But in the 2019 season, the turnovers were back. He was 23-20 on his touchdowns to interceptions. The Chargers went 5-11, and they really just needed a revamp, as we've seen in the draft. They drafted Justin Herbert, and Philip Rivers has moved on to the Indianapolis Colts. There in Indianapolis, he's finally got a good offensive line to protect him. Hopefully they can come around here and protect me, as my background's just fallen on the head. And maybe he'll go on to win a Super Bowl one day. We're all waiting to see if he can make that hump. So last but not least is Big Ben, drafted at number 11 out of Miami University. That is not Miami in Florida, that is Miami, Ohio. Currently his stats are 218 games, 64.3 passing completion, 56,545 yards, 363 touchdowns, and 191 interceptions. He's a 6-time Pro Bowler, 2-time Super Bowl champion, 2004 Rookie of the Year, and the youngest quarterback to win the Super Bowl. So when the younger generation will say about Patrick Mahomes and how great his first 2 years as a starter is, you can look back to Ben Roethlisberger and how eerily similar they really are. In Ben Roethlisberger's first year, he took over, went 13-0, he made it to the playoffs, He met the New England Patriots in the AFC Championship game, only to lose, but he took home Rookie of the Year. And then in his second season, he didn't play as well, but he still played pretty well. But he was injured for 4 games with a knee injury, and then came back and went on to win the Super Bowl, beating Seattle. Didn't play well in the Super Bowl. Like, Mahomes actually did play well in the Super Bowl. Big Ben didn't, but he did crash home for a touchdown from the 1 yard line. That really set them up for their victory. In 2006, an off-season motorbike crash left him with injuries that he struggled with throughout that season. Came back in 2007, making it to the playoffs, making it to the Pro Bowl, and then returned in 2008, where he led the Steelers on a game-winning drive over the Arizona Cardinals to win the Super Bowl, throwing a 6-yard touchdown pass to San Antonio Holmes with 35 seconds to go on the clock. Interestingly enough, unlike Eli Manning, he doesn't have a Super Bowl MVP. His 2 MVPs in the years he won it was Hines Ward and then San Antonio Holmes. Because I think, as we all know, wide receivers grow on trees in Pittsburgh. Of course, after the 2008 Super Bowl, he then returned again in 2010, where they played off against my Green Bay Packers. That time, Green Bay winning 31-25. And 2 weird things happened that night. One, the world got to see a GOAT wearing a WWE Championship belt, and I ended up eating a block of cheese to celebrate. I do not regret a thing. In 2011, he was playing some of his best football. He made the Pro Bowl once again. He made the playoffs again. This time, though, they went down to the Denver Broncos and a miracle of Tim Tebow. Between 2014 and 2017, they really switched it on again, winning the division most years, winning 11 games, 10 games, 13 games even. But they ran into Baltimore, Denver, New England and Jacksonville. And every time it was almost disappointing that the Steelers couldn't break that hump, couldn't get that 3rd title under Big Ben. And that was sort of his last push in 2018. The team weren't that great. He led the league in passing yards and broke most of his franchise records, but they just weren't the team who were going to be anywhere near challenging. In 2019, he played, 1 game, 2 games, and then was replaced by a man who done more damage to his own helmet than he done to NFL defenses. But he's going to return in 2020. Has he got anything left in the tank? I'm sure we'll find out. But now is the time to pick who won this episode of Career Versus. So if you're looking at it from a talent sort of side, you've got Philip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger, I think, are ahead of Eli Manning. However, Eli has the 2 Super Bowls that Philip Rivers doesn't. He also has 2 MVPs that Ben Roethlisberger doesn't. If you weigh it all up, I think for the best career, if I went to sleep tonight and as I was one of those 3 guys and was like, I've had the best career out of those 3, I think the man who's had the best career is Ben Roethlisberger, followed by Eli Manning. I think his 2 Super Bowls and 2 Super Bowl MVPs outweighs Philip Rivers' consistent play, and then Philip Rivers is in 3rd place. But tell me what you think. Was Philip Rivers' consistent play deserving to be higher on the list? Was the injuries that affected Big Ben over the years maybe push him lower? Was the 2 Super Bowl MVPs enough to get Eli Manning at number 1? You tell me in the comments below. Like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.